Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pure Joy podcast. This is Elaina Love, your host, and today I'm here with Brian Scott of Reality Revolution, and he has a YouTube channel that has over 68,000 followers and a podcast, and I've been following him for over a year now and really love the material he talks about. So today we're just going to dive in and talk a little bit to Brian about all the stuff he has to offer to the world. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on, Elaina.
Yeah, awesome. So, well, the first thing I want to talk to you about is maybe if you could just tell us a little bit about how you got started with the information that you offer. So basically, for people that don't know who Brian is, he offers on his YouTube channel, like he'll read a whole book. And the first thing I heard from you, Brian, was when you started talking about reality transurfing, which is a book done by a Russian author. And that just really intrigued me. And I started listening to a lot of the other stuff you were, the books you were reading, things like Seth Material and Dolores Cannon, who I've been following for years. And it's just really intriguing. And I'm just kind of wondering, how'd you get into like this channeled information, a lot of the stuff that you're now sharing with your listeners?
I think I'm a lot like anybody else. I reached a point in my life when I could see that I had affected reality, but I had not done a very good job of it. My reality was terrible, and I felt like I was in a muck, very difficult situation for me to overcome, with massive debts and addictions and problems with love, and it felt hopeless. And I was somebody that loved to read and had a unique ability to access a lot of information quickly. And so I just did what I knew how to do. And that was, I'm gonna read and learn and figure out if I can change this, because I clearly have created my reality. I could see this terrible reality around me. It was very familiar to me because I had created it. It was all stuff I had imagined that had gone rampantly become my reality. So I desperately wanted to change my reality, and I wanted to figure out a way to do it. And I felt hopeless. There was going to be no $10,000 mentor I could hire to coach me through it. So from my experience in college, just deeply started researching this stuff and started reading everything I possibly could, and started to understand the physics behind it, and started to change my reality, and had some really mystical, powerful experiences in deep meditation. And then, as I talk about in my book, I had this incredible moment where somebody broke into my house and shot at me, and the bullet bounced off my back, and it was a miracle that I lived. And following this, it felt like I had traveled to another reality, and I was somewhat concerned that, hey, maybe I've gone insane. This does not go with my standard of scientific understanding of the world. I'm seeing things that shouldn't be there, that weren't there before. I'm talking to people that I've never talked to. My reality seems like I'm in a movie somehow different. So in order to just maintain my sanity, I started to research, in particular, parallel realities, and started coming up with a lot of stuff. And as I learned this stuff and applied it, my understandings of physics and spirituality, and my world changed, and I was able to overcome all that stuff. I felt like a responsibility. Like if I held this to myself, it would be so sad and ridiculous, because my change can be factored into other people. So I tried to share this knowledge with the YouTube channel and my book as much as possible, to let people know. And no matter how hopeless your situation is, it can change. You can change it through your thoughts and actions. And so I've tried to, my YouTube channel is a journey of me learning and teaching at the same time, they kind of go together. And you can see the progression of what I've learned as I shared this material. And if I find a book that I can read on the channel, I will, and we'll go over it in detail. And I'm still learning. I'm still a student. So I still want to share the stuff I learn as well. So.
And I love all the different things you share. Like one that you had recently posted on your podcast on YouTube is the teachings of the Law of One. That was with Jim McCarty,
Yes.
who helped translate it. And like, I found that all so fascinating, but I would love to, gosh, there's just so many questions I want to ask you. First, what's the name of your book that you?
The Reality Revolution, the mind-blowing movement to hack your reality.
Awesome. And is that a published book or an ebook
Yeah,
or?
you can find it on Amazon. It's on Audible as well, anywhere that books are sold.
Oh, okay.
Something
Awesome.
I'm really proud of and working on for a long time. And
Yeah.
um, interestingly, when you write a book, it takes a long time to get published. So I had not really accessed the Neville Goddard stuff as much. So it's kind of me pre-Neville Goddard exploring the physics of maneuvering through parallel realities. And, so uh, that's what that book kind of encapsulates.
Okay. Well, I would love to dive a little deeper in with you on that.
Sure.
Like, so, okay, so you said that someone broke into your house and shot you, and the bullet bounced off of your back. Did it like hit your backbone and then bounce off of you, or like what happened in that situation?
It was a string of unusual circumstances that led to it. Some people had jumped the backyard, and it was next to a park. And so they had, it was the night the Broncos won the Super Bowl, and I'm just distracted, and I didn't lock my back door, and somebody tried to open the porch door, and they were coming in, and I walked up. I didn't know they were there, and there was this kid standing there with a gun pointed at me. So I shut the porch door really quickly. It was a double pane glass, and he was shooting me with a 22. So I could, as time slowed down, I could see all the different possibilities that were going to happen before me. Like over here, I'm laying dead. It was a very mystical experience. But he shoots at me through the porch door, so it slows down a little bit. I could hear the bullets being slowed down by the first glass and then the second one. So it's a 22. So part of it is the physics of it. At the 22 shooting through double pane of glass is slowed down. I'm moving away from it, so it just bounces off my back. And the angle I was at and everything, it was honestly a miracle to me that it happened. And then, of course, afterward, I'm just kind of going, wow, if I shouldn't be alive and I don't deserve a second chance, and I haven't, there's no reason. So it kind of just it was a big paradigm shift for me. It wasn't really what had happened, but how I felt afterwards, and kind of this desire to earn the second chance I had been given.
And so you said that as it was happening, it's kind of like almost, it sounds almost like a near-death experience where everything slows down and you could see it actually happening in front of you.
Yeah, it really was. It was. I felt like my life was flashing before my eyes. Time completely changed. Something was happening. And the weird thing is I didn't get scared. I had kind of like met my higher self in a deep meditation before. And I felt like I'd been warned something big was going to happen. I felt like there was a feeling that this was happening, that I had been told about it, that I was not experiencing it in the moment, that I was remembering it. I was remembering the things to do.
Yeah.
But how could I explain it to anybody? It's such a crazy, how could I explain it? And when I've tried to explain it to some people, I get that crazy look in their eyes, glaze over. And so I've chosen not to explain it to some people. And that's why I put it in the book, because it does sound crazy. There's some craziness to it.
Well, it can sound crazy to people that aren't exploring the materials that you are sharing and
Right, yeah.
that I've been learning about. And so that's why I really was interested in talking to you, because I feel like now is the time, and I'm getting the chills as I say this, people are awakening and they need the information. And so now, like a story like yours, to me, doesn't sound crazy at all. And I can totally imagine you being there in that and having pre-imagined it and almost maybe been told about it so that you would know what to do. And that is part of being awake in the world, which a lot of people, I know a lot of my listeners are waking up, and I know a lot of yours are too, because I read all the comments. And people need this information, because let's face it, when someone starts to wake up, let's just say they get this meditation or something happens where they're just like, I know there's more to life than what I see. And then what? Then where do they go? They find a channel like yours, and like you're talking about all the different people out there that have been finding this information and sharing it. And I think it's such a gift what you're offering. And even the story that you just told, like, to know that people aren't crazy if maybe they have similar experiences, or that they do have these questions.
Absolutely. 100% right now. I do believe we're going through a mass awakening. There's two sides. There's the fake mass awakening that everybody wants to talk about, that where they say, oh, this stuff is happening out there, and I'm going to sit on my couch and drink a beer and watch this happen. But it's the awakening inside that's happening. It's the changes that we are going through internally as we come to an understanding of who we really are and how the world works. That is the Great Awakening. And I discussed the implications of the Great Awakening in the Law of One material. I tried to talk about it in the Dolores Cannon material, and it is. People have gone through similar awakenings, but never on a scale like this. It's just a situation where it just leads to people sitting at home, and then they don't have much time to watch. They're tired of that same old cartoon they were watching, and then they close their eyes and they go within and they hear that voice, and it begins. It could be a simple meditation, but so many people are starting to understand that it's everything's a lot more than they thought, and that is the awakening that's exciting. But hey, I've been there. I know how they're feeling. I know the confusion. I know what does this mean? I know, and I'm not claiming to be any expert. I'm just claiming, hey, this is what I went through, so you don't have to necessarily waste your time with this stuff over here. This is what I've learned, and I'm still, if you got something to teach me, I'm going to listen, because I think there's something more to it, and it's still happening. And the Law of One material makes it sound galactic. Something huge will happen on this planet. There's a huge shift, like it'll affect the whole planet in a big way. So
Yeah. So I'd like to actually ask you, because kind of what you're referring to for people that are listening maybe at a later time, we're right in the middle of COVID isolation, right? So it's middle of May, and everybody's just kind of wondering what the heck's happening. And for me, I feel like we are on this planet, like those of us who have chosen to be here, especially those of us who are adults who've chosen to be here, like we have front row seats for something
big.
Amazing that's happening. And I've been watching people around me just like with this time of more contemplation is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Like instead of, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of TV, or I'm sick of this news. Like when people finally have had enough, which I think now, like we're a little over 2 months in, that they are going to kind of, okay, well, what else is out there? Maybe I will try meditation. Maybe I will try these other things. And I know for me, what happened is like, I had already been a meditator, and it's always been like something that really gives me a lot of peace. But when this hit, I started kind of getting this, like we all got this influx of information. And even those of us who don't watch the news, and I'm trying my best just to avoid information, it's like you can't. It's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, it's coming at you from all angles. And the one thing that kind of came to me was like dark forces on the planet. I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm not an activist that's going to go out there and like hold signs, but I can do internal work. So what I started doing, and it came to me just kind of like you said, like things just come to you and you just know it's the right thing to do. So for me, I work with the archangels, and I've been working with something called the violet flame for years. Awesome. But I stepped it up. I've been doing like over an hour a day of violet flame invocations, where you're doing a piece of protection for the entire planet and bringing in Archangel Michael for protection and clearing and this and that. And that to me, like awakened something within me. And then I started getting into quantum meditation and like seeing that I'm the entire planet, and just like expansion, which to a lot of people could sound totally woo, but I know you completely get it.
It's not woo. It's if you follow the Law of One, it's scientific.
Yeah.
It's there's a science to it. The Law of One is, if people haven't watched, it's basically a scientifically channeled work where they use scientific principles, and using 3 people for 3 years, from 1981 through 84, after 20 years of experimentation, we're able to get in contact with an incredibly high dimensional 6th density multidimensional being that was a social memory complex from the planet Venus from 3 billion years ago. I know that sounds crazy when I say it out loud. I know it sounds crazy when I say it out loud. You can go to lawofone.info, and when they spoke, the words were clearly not coming from the channel. She did not speak like that. Those were not the words that she used. So they were coming clearly from somewhere else. You have to analyze it for yourself, but the information is very interesting, and it has not been disproven. It's talking about big picture things like what the sun is, what the planets are, and how civilizations on planets transform and evolve in the universe. It talks about consciousness. We know, looking around us, that there are levels of consciousness, that the molecule and the bacteria has a different level of consciousness as the insect, as the animal, as the rock, as the dog does, as the human being, and that there are these levels of consciousness. And so Ra explains that there's densities of light, and that dense is how much a certain reality can only maintain a certain level of light. And so, the first density, the molecule, can only maintain a certain level of light. And then we're in third density, but we are shifting into fourth density, which is what happened to Ra. Ra had it happened. Ra has seen other civilizations where it happened. And Ra is like, we want to help, because it can be a small number of people that transform, but they're transforming into a social memory complex, like you're talking about. Starting when we start worrying about the whole planet as a group, there is a thought pattern that starts to form where we become something more than ourselves. Even though we're individualized, there is a social memory complex. The Akashic record, or this record of all of humanity, becomes a conscious living thing, and we are a part of it, which is incredibly exciting. But also our bodies transform, and we transform, and we change. We become that higher density being of light. This has been talked about in secret doctrines for thousands of years, all the way before the time of Jesus, in ancient doctrines and manuscripts, as I've talked about on my YouTube channel. There is a major change that occurs when there is a shift into fourth density, and we are in it right now, at the very cusp of it. And the Dolores Cannon material indicates that we came here, and the whole universe is watching us. And this is a really exciting time, because the way it's happening on our planet is different than any other planet in the universe. I don't know if that's true. It sounds dramatic, but it feels genuine to me that there's something special happening. And because we have competing forces of service to self and negative forces that are completely aware of this transition, and they're doing everything they can to stop it from happening, by subverting it, by conspiracy theories, by fear, because they know how powerful we are, and we're constantly having our abilities used against us to subvert this transition. It's been going on since 2012, when it's become more and more powerful, and we've seen changes. I know that sounds crazy, and I just tell anybody to go and research this stuff. My channel has been trying to elaborate on it. I'm not claiming any absolute truth. I'm constantly trying to uncover the what I know personally from the information that I find, is the best way I can explain it.
I totally agree. And I think that that's why I love your channel, because you're not just coming from one source. And I mean, I recently have listened to the interview you did with Jim about the Law of One, and how the one part that really fascinated me was that when they were channeling Ra, they did this ritual to make sure that it was only Ra that they were channeling, because a lot of information coming through channels and different things, like we don't really know how much of that is true. And a lot of what I've heard is that it could be 75% truth and 25% lies, and that there's all kinds of good entities and maybe darker entities. I don't want to call them bad, but just like there's different levels of things. So the one thing I loved about when they were channeling is they did this ritual where they called in, then made sure that it was only Ra, because what you said when you guys were talking in that interview, that if there's a chance for Ra to come in, like this positive information, that the darker entities are also allowed, because of the rules of the planet, like they're allowed to also give information. So sometimes we don't really know what's true. And I think that's what's happening right now during just what I want to call COVID.
Yeah,
like
turn on your YouTube channel.
Like we don't know what's true anymore. I mean, we just are more and more confused every day. Like what is happening?
When I see people, I'm I'm channeling Ra. I just got this channel from Ra last night when I was sleeping. Ra was talking to me, and there's even some successful authors that claim to channel Ra. When you look at the way that they scientifically did it and the process they went through, you have to judge for yourself with any channel. But some people will just claim to be channeling stuff, and it may not be true. The best thing that we can always do is we have to judge it for ourselves. There's a portion of ourselves that knows the truth. I think there's a portion of ourselves that almost automatically knows the truth. And I'm not going to sit out and point out anybody in particular, because our whole spiritual journey is constantly that. We're constantly looking at sources of information and questioning it. And if it's true, and it's going to be individualized for everyone. I can only say in my own case, this resonates as true when you test it out and really examine where it came from and the information that's given.
Yeah.
But anybody that accesses it should be questioning it 100%.
Constantly. So what would you, because so that's a good question. Like, so how would you, and not necessarily, I know that the raw materials, like that information, and I've heard about it before, the Law One and everything, like, I'm not questioning that, but I'm just saying, just what's happening, like with all the information coming at us now. Let's just say someone is watching the news, or they are like listening to things about vaccinations, or, you know, Bill Gates, or this or that. Like, how would you, because I know you've done so much research and you've done so much reading, like, how would you approach finding out for yourself if something is true or not? Like,
well, first of all, what importance are you putting on it? The Dolores Cannon information, she had some entities that were from the Council of Nine on Saturn and some advanced entities. And the first thing I would say is most of it doesn't matter. Most of it doesn't matter. Even if it's true, it doesn't matter. There could be 1 trillion child pedophiles out there, and Bill Gates could have the most evil plan in the world. It doesn't matter. And I'm not saying any of that's true. I'm saying that all the stuff that you're hearing, 99% of it, to me, is fear-based, that doesn't have any evidence in reality. And as the information in the Dolores Cannon material and the Law of One material is that you're making individual choices every day, and that your own positivity and fear and choices will lead you to this new earth. Essentially, that material indicates that there's like 2 separate earths that are kind of coming together. One that's more positive, like the new earth that's talked about in the Bible, and one that's more negative. And that's kind of how the universe always lets its energy disperse in its own way. So it's the negative is going towards. So if you're going to sit and focus on this fear and worry about it, even if it's true, you're pulling yourself on an energy level towards all that other stuff.
Right.
People will question, Brian, why are you questioning these conspiracy theories? You're a bootlicker. You should totally, you know, and I'm going, it doesn't matter. The point is, the conspiracy theories in many cases, I personally believe, are attempts by the service to self and negative factions to distract us from the awakening that we want to do. You're not going to be distracted from going within, but you might be distracted from going within if you think something else is going on outside. When I hear groups saying, oh, the great awakening is happening, watch over here when this thing happens. If you wake up and a bunch of stuff happens, you will still not be awoken if you have not done the process of yourself. What we're learning is the power of our own selves to create reality. And we are gods. And that this future new earth, we will be God-like beings of light that live for 90,000 years. And everything will, you know, at least that's what some of them indicate. There's been more than one entity that have said that. If it's true or not. But you're going to move towards that reality by the choices that you make on an individual basis. And if you're thinking about Bill Gates, I mean, let's be honest, Bill Gates is worth $107 billion. He doesn't need any more money. He may be wrong in what he's doing, but he has the best of intentions, and he is not evil. And if you think he's evil, then where is that coming from? Why? What are the reasons that that's coming from? What are the things that you are basing your fear-based ideas around? Look at what's going on. What are the underlying? There's always, that's one of the reasons why, like you said, it all seems to interact, doesn't it? The reality transurfing stuff is a science on how to maneuver through these realities. And a big thing in that book is pendulums, these energy structures that form when you watch the media, when we get focused on one idea. So the Bill Gates thing becomes a pendulum.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with Bill Gates. It just becomes this energy entity, and people are thinking about it, and it takes your energy away. So these pendulums are constantly forming that pull you and distract you from the timeline that is best for you if you read the transurfing information. So the best thing to do is access the news on a very minimal basis.
Mhm.
You need to get a little bit of information, but as soon as you start, be aware that you are giving your energy, and be aware that you are how you're giving your energy. Get the basic information that you need. Don't dwell in it.
Yep.
Don't be reading news right now that says this is what happens when you get sick. There's this symptom, and then there's this symptom, and then there's this symptom. Let's go to a commercial, and we'll talk about a medicine, and it has all the different symptoms, and we'll talk about all the symptoms. Oh, let's interview this person, and when she got sick, this is what happened. And let's interview this person when he got sick. Oh, and there's a chance that this vaccine could fail. Let's talk about how that could fail. And if you're just sitting and watching that, you are imagining all the stuff they're talking about.
Yeah, and then that affects your entire reality. I mean,
It does.
my best advice is don't even have a TV.
Right.
And I found for me, because I'm someone who has not watched TV in years, that if there's something I need to know, I mean, even way back in 911, my friend called me and said, "Do you know what just happened? Because I know you don't watch
Right.
TV."
You'll
Like,
find out.
you're gonna find out. And so yeah, like that is a pendulum. The news is a pendulum. Like, why are we giving all of our energy to these people that are just trying to make money off of us? So I totally agree with you, Brian, that it's all about what you focus on. And that was like my first introduction to this kind of thing is law of attraction with Abraham Hicks, where they said, whatever you focus on
You're going to
expands.
get more of,
So
right?
if you're going to focus on wearing a mask and worrying about getting sick and giving everybody dirty looks with your eyes if they're not wearing a mask, guess what? You're just going to attract
More of
more
it.
of that into your life.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. But the one point is, I have a friend that doesn't watch the news. So I was talking to them, and they were more conspiracy. They had more conspiracy. So I was like, you are watching the news. You're just watching the news that is alighting you, and you're giving your energy. So when people say, I don't watch the news, what does that mean? That means they're not watching the mainstream news, which can sometimes be even worse. It's everything. It's everything that we're accessing.
Yeah.
Even music that is depressing. All of it is important when you create your reality. All the outside stuff is important. Um, that's
Yes. So that's why just like listening to material and finding material that resonates. So I loved something you said just a little bit ago is like going within. And that's really the only thing we can trust.
right.
We can trust our internal guidance, but we have to get reconnected to that.
Yes.
So like, what would be some advice that you would give on like how to reconnect to your inner guidance? And some people are so lost, they don't even know where to start.
To begin with, the simplest and easiest thing that you can do is quiet your mind. Uh, a lot of times when we talk about meditation, it's for a lot of people, it's not very fun and it's hard, and they don't want to do it. It's the most frustrating thing. When I would coach more, I would say, you got to meditate. Come on, give me 5 minutes to just meditate. And they couldn't even do that, even though they had all the time in the world. And there's some kind of block for a lot of people about meditating. Maybe they're busy and it feels uncomfortable. Maybe there's some part of their deep self that is scared of them going through this awakening, that's not ready. So what I've tried to do when I teach meditation is to make it fun. So don't be looking at it like it's like you got to go work out and then got to do your meditation. You got to spend that, got to allot some time in. You should do it like when you enjoy watching a TV show, you don't allot the time to watch your TV show. You do it because you're excited and you have fun. So don't be mechanistic about it. Find a way to meditate that is fun.
Yeah.
And if there is no right way to meditate. If you're meditating about unicorns, then you are meditating. It may not be the best, but start with something as fun. And as you do, that voice will start to speak to you. What's happening is that we're not, there's the definition of meditation is kind of messed up. We're always meditating all the time because when we're living. So it's really about differentiation of our consciousness when we're meditating, and what does that mean? For a lot of times when we pray, we're talking to God or we're putting out a wish or something, but we're not listening. So meditation is kind of like listening. And then in that process of listening, we want to meditate at the same time. We want to create our reality. So there's this thing that we're juggling between creating and listening. And then as we do it, everybody has their own process. And as we do it, we become better and better at it. And then we start to see our realities change around us. And it's different for everybody. And I've tried to make it as fun. That's the best thing I can do that I've noticed with meditation is just make it fun. Try to make it fun. You will have fun with meditation. It is fun.
Yeah. And then once you start to do it, then like for me, my ritual is I just get up every morning, and before I do anything else, I'll
Perfect.
usually journal a little bit about dreams or just about anything. And then I have an altar space, which you don't have to call it an altar, but you could just have a space where you have beautiful things, crystals. For me, I light a candle, I light some incense. I have, an app, which I listen to, one called Insight Timer, but I do different ones now. But yeah, like you said, like make it fun, make it something where you enjoy sitting down in the same spot, make it
Hmm.
super comfortable. It could be a chair. It doesn't have to be,
Right.
like we think we have to meditate like a monk or something. It's like you could sit in the most comfy chair in your house with your
Right.
feet up and listen to some awesome music, and that could be meditation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I want to get to people. If you start the process of meditation, you will then seek out whatever you'll start to figure out the things that you need to make it better, and you will improve, and you will get to that point where you will be a good meditator. But the first point is don't criticize yourself. Don't make it hard. It doesn't have to be long. Just meditate. That's the biggest problem, is we have a lot of people out there that have the desire and they have the vibration. I can feel it. They want to do these things, but there's something blocking them
Hmm.
from doing that one little step of going within.
Well,
So
and I think too, and you can tell me what you think about this, but asking is so important, because we do have guardian angels. We do have a
we do.
higher self, which hangs out maybe in the 11th dimension, or I'm not sure where. And we have these beings around us that are here to help us. They're benevolent beings, but they have to wait for us to ask.
Yes.
And that's why that whole channeling of the law of one, of Ra, they were designed, they had to ask, because they didn't
Yeah.
want just bombardment. Like we as humans are already bombarded enough. Like, so ask, like just all we have to do is say one
Is
thing, like,
ask.
please show me a meditation that's going to wake me up. That's it. And then wait for
Yeah.
something to come into your space.
One of the most exciting concepts from the law of one is their definition of the higher self, which is that it is you in the future that has already gone up to the 6.5 density. All beings, once they reincarnate for millions of years or whatever, 75 million years, which is what it is at the 6th density, it's like hundreds of million years in the future, maybe a billion.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point where they go back, and that higher self knows all of your possible realities, and will communicate and help you along the way. But just like Ra, will not violate your goodwill, and you have to ask. So once I was aware that I have this higher self, I started asking. Just ask, hey, what? And you will hear a voice, and it could be it could be guidance, it'll be something, but it is very particular, and your higher self knows all the things. If you go to the store, if it's the right thing for you to do, if you want to make tacos tonight, if it's the right, it could be the most simple thing, right? And so the best thing to do is with this concept of the higher self, it's really exciting. You have somebody that knows all the answers about all the different realities that you're in, and you can ask them and they'll help you along the way. So that resource is pretty amazing, and that's separate from spirit guides, which are also available to you, and all of those things are important. Even in transurfing, they talk about it. You have allies all around you. I do believe that there is a spirit world, and you can use those to your benefit. Absolutely. For some people, that's hard to do. The scientist that doesn't believe in those things. But the thing I would point out is, for the people that do, they generally end up having there. It's just as an experiment. The people that utilize these spirit guides and higher selves have greater things happen, have cooler events happen, manifest pretty amazing things. How are they able to do that? Even if those things are not true for the scientist, it still works. It still works. It has an effect. So
Well, and that's what you kind of started out this conversation with, that you had, like when you started to have this awakening, that these synchronicities start to happen, and that you had recognized that your life was not on a good trajectory. So there was some part of you that you must have like asked for something different, right? Is that
yeah.
like what happened? You kind of went, I don't want this
Please help
anymore.
me. What do I need to do?
Yeah.
I need the knowledge. Give it to me. I need to know. What do I need to do? Yeah,
Yep. So
absolutely.
that was your question. And then
Right.
what I love, and this is the same thing that happened to me a little over 20 years ago, is then all suddenly, like synchronicities, you think of a person and they call you, or just life just seems to get easier and better. And I think
Hmm.
what a lot of people don't know is that life is designed to be good. It's not
Hmm.
supposed to be this hard struggle. And if it is, then we need to ask for something different.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, I can only say in my own case, from the time that I've made these choices and taken these teachings, my life has never been better, almost in a cartoonish way, like I'm in some kind of grand movie, and I pinch myself on a regular basis. This doesn't seem real, but it is real, and it's completely a result of the actions that I've taken in creating my reality. And I've tried to outline those things in my channel. That's the purpose of the channel. Is I feel a responsibility. I got to share this stuff because I want other people to know it doesn't cost anything. It's free. It's all within you. These things that you can learn and use are available to everybody. The whole world can have the same thing. There's no limit.
Yeah, and so I feel like what you're teaching us and what you're doing through your channel is showing us that we have access to creating, because we are creators, like showing us that
We
we're
are.
creators. And through all these different people, like Dolores Cannon, for people who don't know, she was a hypnotist. She died, I think, back in the 90s. Is that right?
I think so.
And she was hypnotizing people. And then one day she kind of hypnotized, because the first book I ever read from her was called Between Death and Life, which is she was hypnotizing someone, and then they're like, oh, well, I died. And she's like, well, now what happened? And they're like, oh, well, I needed to learn not to be afraid because I drowned in 6 inches of water. And like, then she kind of just kept going and going. And then suddenly she started getting these people coming in, like, I mean, she goes into so many deep, like, I
Yeah.
feel like her channelings, and not even channelings, but her hypnotism and the things that she extracts from these people when they're under hypnosis is like unlocking keys to the universe, like these
It is.
spectacular stories of alien abductions, but also like our Akashic records and what it looks like when you go out into the Akash, and like the
Hmm.
answers to everything you could ever possibly want to know. So the information's out there. And what I feel like you're doing is you're distilling it down. Like, here's Dolores Cannon, and this is what she's teaching. And look, this stuff from Neville Goddard is very similar. And oh,
Yeah.
look, here's the Law of One. Like, how are you? So, I guess what I'd like to ask is like, how are you deciding what you want to share, and like, how's it coming to you?
Well, I asked my higher self. Yeah. A lot of times with this information, it does kind of feel like an information overload because there is so much information out there. So what I'm trying to do is this sort of open source spirituality. And it is very much like cooking in the kitchen. We're not going to use all the ingredients, but I want to make the best dish, and I'm using the best information and trying to integrate it as I go along. And I'm always asking, my higher self, what is the best thing that I can do next that will help? And it's the weirdest thing. I'll suddenly have a book from an author I've never heard, and I'm reading a chapter that is mind blowing. And next thing you know, I'm reading it, and I had never even heard of this author.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had that happen a couple of times. And so I'm just continually, what can I ask? What can I do? What can I talk about? What can I teach? And the more I ask those questions, the more I'm given more information. And there's so much more out there. It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
So it kind of just comes into it sounds like it just comes through your
Yeah.
conscious.
When I sit down to do an episode, generally, a lot of times I'm not planning it out. I'll sit down and like, okay. And then within a couple of minutes, I'll be guided to some reading or book or lecture or something, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about Neville Goddard, because I had never heard of him. And honestly,
Yeah.
I heard about him. I listened to a podcast called Synchronicity with his name is, I'm not thinking of his name, but, and then several other people who I listened to their YouTube channel or podcast. Suddenly Neville Goddard is everywhere. I'm like, who is this guy that I have been studying this stuff for 20 years and I've never
Yeah.
heard of? Like, what do you think about that? And
Well,
like, why
it's
did he
really
suddenly
interesting.
appear on the scene?
The first time I accessed the Neville Goddard stuff, I was in that state where if it was biblical in any way, I'm out. Because, just because I don't, if it comes off like he's really trying to sell me on some religious idea. So I read The Feeling is the Secret, which is wonderful. And then I opened up another book. I think it was Seed Time and Harvest. And I was like, God, this is really not for me. And so I bailed on it, but then I came back to it. Neville Goddard was this speaker in the 60s, and he is very unique. He was teaching essentially the law of attraction, but he called it the law of assumption. And when you read about his history, he would study the Bible for 8 hours a day and had read multiple different languages of it. And so he has this super deep understanding of the Bible. And then, according to him, he has this awakening where he has all of the experiences that Christ had, and then claims that the Bible is nothing to do with history. It has nothing to do with some things that happened in the past, that the Bible is a biography of you, and all of the characters in the Bible are states that we all go through, and that we're all going through a pattern. Very much, I'll tell you why it links to the Dolores Cannon in a second, but he's saying we've been all going through this pattern of different incarnations. We play the blind man, we play the poor man, we've gone through all of these. We came down, we were all gods, the Elohim. We came down on purpose as a form of expansion to go through these experiences, because once we did, we became a new being that's even more expanded. And he talks about seeing in his vision the new body that he would have in the new world. He calls it a garment, but a body of light. And he sees and experiences and meets God, and explains that God's not one being. God is plural. That's how it's described in the Bible. And then explains through lessons of the Bible upon this awakening. And for a lot of people that come from a biblical background, it does awaken something in them, because they're hearing those teachings. But the stories and techniques that he gives, even if you're not coming from a biblical background, are super powerful. And he's really, the most basic is just experimenting with the sleep state and entering into states. In the sleep state, you create your reality will begin to reflect it. He's saying the same things as transurfing, that the world is a mirror. And he explores these different states that are reflected in the Bible. And interesting thing about Neville Goddard, when people went to visit him, he was like, I'm not passing out anything. I don't want your money. If I ever ask for your money, then you need to leave right away. I only want you to know that I'm going to prove this to you. I have awoken and I want to prove it to you. And when you hear those words, it reflects about what's going on right now, about this being that has awoken, and he wants everyone else to awaken. He's explaining the pattern of waking. But the really unusual thing, he has kind of two lectures. He'll talk about imagination and the law, which he calls the law of assumption, which is this law that we have. If we follow it, our reality will be created. And it's true. When you apply his law of assumption, it works. But he also has this thing, the promise, where he describes these experiences he had in vision as he awoke. Everything from holding the baby of his new body to having David, a symbolic form of humanity, say, "You are my father." And so some of that just sounds crazy, but over time, all of his lectures, the way he used language and the references that he gave, I've learned a tremendous amount. I think there is something to some kind of deep understanding of the awakening process that comes from the Neville literature. But in some ways, it's not for everybody, because that religious part of it, and some people don't like that.
Yeah, there is a religious slant to it. And that's why I'm asking you about it, because I have learned more about him through your channel and also through Noah Lampert, who's the one who does synchronicity. But for me personally to go and listen to him, I am not resonating with his, for whatever reason.
When I listen to him,
when I was brought up Catholic, and like, it's not that I have anything against the Bible, but it's just sometimes it feels thick. I guess that's a good way to think of it. But you're able to translate it in a way, and that's what I love about your channel. With a lot of these things, like, you just take it and you distill it down and like give us the juicy tidbits.
Well, the truth, he's not being religious. He's using the term Christ as you, as the God within you that's awakening. But he's using all of the religious terms, but explaining it all in a different way. So he's saying all the things that we believe, but it's really for that person that they relate to those religious terms in some way. So some ways, I agree with you. I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
But as long as we're getting the information, it doesn't matter. And that's why I thought it was curious that suddenly this guy from the 60s is suddenly on the scene. Like nobody's heard of him. And now here he is, like
Right.
spoke. And so in a way he's living on through you and through people like Noah, like you guys are resonating with it. And it doesn't really matter how we get the information. I mean, and that's why I think this time of awakening that we're in, and I just find this also curious. And like right now more than ever in these 20 years that I've been studying and like looking in, I feel like there's just this huge mass awakening.
Yes.
Have you experienced that as well? Like noticing people around you, more and more people being drawn to what you're teaching?
Absolutely, 100%. Probably the reason that the channel is popular right now, because there is this mass awakening. But as we learned from the Law of One, people have awoken in the past and gone into the fourth density on their own individually, as he says in that interview. And so what we're doing is we're looking back at people that have done that, that have gone into the fourth density. We've seen examples of their lives and we're learning from their teachings. And so that's why the reason that people are fascinated with this stuff is that they know that something's happening within. And so they're looking out to see other examples of people that have had these awakenings. And that I think is why this material is so interesting right now.
And so like, just so we can get clear, because I've heard, so this is what I've heard, like we're in 3D right now, third density, and that fifth density, a lot of people are talking about 5D, which is the new earth. But I guess it's just different terminology, because I've kind of heard that 4D might be like more the dark side, which is not necessarily bad. We need to also be able to look at that, but that we're moving into 5D and beyond. Like, so
there's it depends on which you're talking about. Dolores Cannon material indicates that we have a possibility of jumping directly to fifth density. The Law of One material does not indicate any evil with fourth density. It is the density of love and understanding. This fifth density is love and wisdom. When they take Carla, the channel, in the Law of One sessions, they take her to the fifth density, which is pure light, is all that she could remember. So we may be moving towards a fifth density, but there is no evil with the fourth density. I think we're moving to the fourth density. A lot of times we throw these terms around, and it's really, we're shifting to another reality. And in this reality, we have a greater ability to create our reality around us. We have greater power. We are the power we express is magnified. Our power is low key when we're riding around in these bodies, in this density. We are according to Ra, we are not in the third density anymore. We are third density bodies in a fourth density space. The Earth, as it's going around the galaxy, goes through a section where it's fourth density. And so that's why we're seeing upheavals and changes. That's why there's a reality revolution, at least the argument that Ra is making. Have you noticed that when your thoughts become reality, what happened in the 90s, it might have taken a couple of years, but now it takes a couple of days. There's some kind of quickening in the reality. And I've heard this from a lot of people. And that's why there is more of an awakening, because people are, hey, I was thinking about a white cat the other day, and next thing you know, we have a white cat 2 days later. Now, in the 90s, you might have had a thought, and then you wouldn't even know that you created it because it was such a lag time. So it's even happening in scientific experiments. The placebo effect, which is always used to test drugs, is so strong they can't effectively determine whether or not certain drugs are effective, because the placebo effect is so powerful. People are, because their minds are more powerful. Why is it the world is so crazy? Why do we have more wars or crazy political incidents happen? It's because there's our fears. One thing we learned from Neville Goddard is that the feeling is the secret, that we are creating from our feelings. So what we see is everybody watching TV getting scared, and then their fears are becoming real, actualized very quickly. We're seeing, oh, I'm scared about this virus. Next thing you know, we have a pandemic. Everything is happening all the time because people's fears. And the more we focus on our fears, the more they start to create reality. So that was the reason when I started the podcast. We are in a period, I know it 100%, where reality is happening. We are in a reality revolution. And it's important for us to realize this, because if we don't, it's like we're riding on a bus that has no driver, and it's just taking us along. And so our fears are becoming manifest constantly all the time.
Yeah.
So if we can have a mass awakening, the best mass realization is a mass understanding of reality creation. Because once we hit that tipping point, we can change the world to have anything that we want. That's what I believe. And so that's why we have so much turmoil right now and so much craziness in the world, because people are creating their reality. They just don't know it. They're just,
Right.
there's the society is created around media that focuses on fears. So you see that fear, next thing you know, you're experiencing that fear. And so that's happening and I feel like almost an obligation to tell people, hey, you need to change the way you think, because I'm
Right.
seeing it. So
Change the channel of thought, like change
right.
what you're tuning into.
If all you think about is how terrible and dangerous the dangerous virus is in the vaccine is going to happen, then you're going to have a reality where a terrible vaccine is going to destroy you, and it's going to be a terrible reality, and you're going to be saying, I told you so all the way. But that's the point. You create your reality. So you have to create a reality internally where the vaccine's not a big deal, where you are free, you don't have any freedoms, that you find love, that your wealth is in abundance. And people need to have that switch turned on that says, it doesn't matter what's happening out there. Once you assume your power, that you are God, that you are this all-powerful being that's creating reality, none of that matters. The truth of it, none of it matters, because you can create it however you want.
Yeah.
And so that is my thing, that I go through Facebook and I just see the most ridiculous things being said. And the saddest thing is they're going to probably see that come into fruition. They're going to see that.
Yeah, they're basically saying "I told you so" to themselves. Like,
To
oh, I told
themselves,
myself that would happen.
which
Look
is
what
what
I
we
did. I
always
beat it.
do, right? We always say, I told you so to ourselves,
Yeah.
because we're creating our reality. And that's the thing. It's a hard thing to understand, is that effect causes can be the cause, the effect and the cause in that feedback loop. We're always living with causes that are happening and then once we realize it can be the reverse, then it's a big realization. It's hard to understand. And so I think that we're getting closer. That's my goal, at least, for
Yeah.
people to truly realize that they are creating their reality. So many people will say they believe that, but they don't.
Well, there's two things I want to talk to you about before we end today. One is telepathy, because I know as we evolve as a human species and we do want to move into another dimension, we're going to have to really work with our thoughts and our judgments. Because if we're talking about other people, or we're even judging ourselves, like, we're not going to be able to get out of this loop until we get really clear with our own thought pattern. So I want to hear what you think about that. And then the other is, I'd love to hear you talk about the technique that Neville gives, and also that's in reality transurfing, about like, how do we go about creating our reality? So those two things I would love to hear you talk about.
All right. Well, the first part you were talking about, again, remind me, you were talking about the
Telepathy. So,
telepathy,
like,
right?
we
So
are moving into a place where we can just know what people are
yeah.
thinking, but we can't get there, I believe, until we're clear with our thoughts.
One of the reasons that the higher multidimensional beings have a struggle communicating with us is they don't communicate with language. They communicate telepathically. When you communicate telepathically, it's not necessarily with words. It's a stream of images and feelings that are communicated. And so it's an entirely different language. So even the other day, I saw Elon Musk talking about this possibility that we may be able to have neural implants that could be telepathic, which, if you go down the conspiracy road, that's bad. But also, we will start communicating with each other on that level. We already do, but we don't know it. When you have inner conversations with people, when you imagine having a conversation that you're angry with, you're actually telepathically communicating with them. Why is it they act in response to your inner conversation later? When you sit and argue in your mind, and then you go and talk to them, and then you end up arguing. Why? Because they had the argument already, you communicating. We're constantly telepathically communicating with people all the time. And so don't be surprised when people react to the thoughts you have about them. And it's a big realization. It's part of the reality creation. So there's a couple levels to telepathic that, we can send thoughts. I also have a video that uses the Silva control method. If you want to have direct communication, there is a way to do that. I think it's when your brain waves sync together during sleep. If you can ask your higher self, I want to send this message to this person. And they probably will have a block, but when they're in that delta state, a portion of their higher self will be open to it. If you talk to them like you met them on the street and walked up and say, hey, my name's Brian, I want to just tell you, please hire me for that job, I'm a nice person. You can do that. There's ways that, and I've had success where people have told me of success and it does work. But I also believe on another level that you can send communications and by having inner conversations. When they're negative, they seem to come back to you. So I think that there's an awareness of what you're sending out seems to come back to us. Neville talks about doing more than just telepathy, imagining for other people. And in his book, Prayer, the Art of Believing, he explains that if you imagine for someone and then they would wish that upon themselves, or they would wish that upon someone else, then they'll accept it. So if you imagine your friend driving in a convertible and you imagine the hair going through their head, it's good chance they're going to get a convertible. So suddenly there's this wonderful idea with your reality creation powers that you can imagine lovingly for other people beyond telepathy. And so that goes beyond, but telepathy is a constant. And I think that we're going to reach a level where we will be able to communicate with people on, as we adapt and grow, that telepathy will be the way of the game. And eventually we'll stop using our mouths. We won't even talk. I'm interested and excited to see how that changes.
Yeah, I love that too. Just like instead of saying, oh man, like they don't know, they're messing their life up, like to stop yourself and go, well, I'm just going to imagine what they would want for themselves, like the best life ever.
Because you're creating their reality too. You're imagining, oh, they're an F up. They just always are. They're a loser. They never pay their debts. They don't clean their room, whatever. Then they're going to continue doing that because you're creating so stop, forgive them. They're just in a state and create a new state for them. I have people say, well, I despise this person. I want to imagine terrible for this politician that I hate so much. Well, guess what? If you imagine something that they don't want, it's going to come back to you. So we have all these people watching TV and friends imagining evil, terrible things, and then their lives aren't so good. I wonder why. Right. I wonder why that's happening. But here's the wonderful, if they don't want that wish, it comes back to you too. So if you just go around lovingly imagining for people, it will benefit you. And you can change the world, much like you're saying. Start imagining great things for the world. And it's not just happening in your mind. It is a real actual thing that you can see outside in the world. Now, your question about Neville Goddard and transurfing in the creation of reality, there's so many levels to that. I try to explain the mechanics of how reality is created in my book. The techniques that they talk about in reality transurfing and with Neville Goddard there's many different techniques. There's techniques of using your sleep state and imagining. The key thing from both of those that I would find is imagining from the first person perspective. You can imagine that you have a suitcase full of cash, that you see a suitcase full of cash, then you'll see it on TV the next day when you're watching Breaking Bad. Everything's good, right? So this idea of going into the state from this place that you want to imagine is the most important part. And you feel it. You feel what it's like to be in that state. And the thing that reality transurfing adds to it, Neville Goddard gives you the more simplistic, basic technique to use. But reality transurfing kind of explains what to do next, because it's a process. It's a daily process of decisions that you're constantly making. Things come up. So reality transurfing tells you not to cause imbalances, because when you have imbalances occur, sometimes the opposite happens. When you really wish for something really badly, it creates an imbalance. That's not the state. Because if you had accomplished the state that you want to experience or reality that you want, you wouldn't be wishing so badly. It would have already happened. Right. So as soon as it's an art. It's like playing the piano. It's not easy. It's an understanding of the delicate idea of creating. So you almost become a master actor and a shifter of your own identity. And so those two things kind of come together. The best techniques really combine this idea of changing who you are and becoming the observer, creating a balance, and coming from the place where the reality can be created. And those techniques seem to be the most powerful from reality transurfing and Neville Goddard.
Yeah.
There's aspects to both of them. There's specific techniques that they both use, and I try to outline those. But overall, generally, that's what I get from it.
Yeah, and then the one thing I know, like also to imagine, so when you're imagining your reality, then also imagining someone in your life congratulating you on, wow, I'm
Yes.
so happy for you that you're finally in the relationship of your dreams, or that you got that house you wanted, or whatever it is, you know, it doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
and starting with small things and then practicing. So
One of the
yay,
things,
this is just such great information. I love it. I know we could talk and talk and talk, but I
well,
want
one,
to really thank you for coming on
oh,
today,
thanks.
Brian. And I'll put links to your book in the show notes, but also like, what's the best way if people want to follow your channel or want to get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Brian Scott on YouTube, or my website is therealityrevolution.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And hopefully maybe I can have you come back on, because I know we just touched
Anytime.
the tip of the iceberg with all of this. Um, yeah, but I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you, Elaina. I appreciate it.